Are my four audience members?
When I was in high school, we had an assembly in which the vice principal handed out hot pink slips of paper to any student deemed to be in violation of the school's dress code. Behind me sat two students wearing the exact same dress. One girl had a slip in her hand and the other did not. Dress codes in schools as they currently exist are discriminatory in practice, unfair in theory, and perpetuate harmful ideologies and stereotypes. While it may seem to only occur in schools, the repercussions of these events are societal. And while many people think that faculty and students benefit from dress codes, the studies seem to show that the effects are actually the opposite. Today, I'd like to discuss the nature of dress codes as they currently exist, their enforcement, and the harm that they cause. Let's begin by first discussing dress codes themselves, and since many of us may be unfamiliar, we'll begin with student expectations. Common restrictions enforced by dress codes often include the length of skirts and shorts, which usually must be fingertip length or several inches above the knee, tank tops, which are usually not allowed at all, and the requirement that the midriff and undergarments are covered. While this all sounds fairly reasonable, another stipulation that I came across in my research time and time again was that of reasonable modesty. But what is reasonable, and who gets to decide? And doesn't it depend based on your upbringing, the person that you ask, and even things like the weather? Here lies the very tip of the dress code iceberg. According to a Today Show survey following several national dress code scandals, 89% of people agreed that dress codes are too confusing. This number jumped all the way up to 94% among the parents of teenage girls, whose children are inarguably the most restricted by dress code policies. So, what happens if reasonable modesty is not achieved? The main way that these policies are enforced seems to be by humiliation tactics. The photo here is from Stanton High School, and it's a prom flyer that labels appropriate dressers to be good girls and therefore inappropriate dressers to be the opposite. This is obviously inappropriate language to address high school students, minors. In addition to this kind of humiliation tactic and inappropriate and sexualizing language, students are almost always removed from class and are often sent home from school. Some schools will actually provide an alternative outfit, which sounds great and fair, except for in cases like the one outlined in Meredith Harbach's Richmond Law article, in which a student was forced to wear a shame suit of red sweatpants and a bright neon t-shirt labeling them a dress code violation. No matter what the policy is and how it's enforced, recidifying a dress code infraction seems to involve the removal of a student from class and the disruption of their education. Even many of you in my survey answered that you thought that the purpose of a dress code was to limit distractions and increase professionalism. But these kind of acts seem highly unprofessional and like they're doing more to disrupt the school day than to keep it flowing smoothly. So, what is actually the alternative? Well, some worry about a total lack of protocol regarding student attire leading to inappropriate dress and chaos. Alameda Unified School District has enacted a shame-free code of dress. This code of dress aims to let students and parents decide what is appropriate and comfortable when they go to school. The same principle was applied in my own school after a coalition of students expressed their discomfort with the previous policy, and it's worked very well. No more disruption of education, students get input on their privileges, and there is the rejection of humiliation. Alameda's dress code is as follows: no violence, illegal activity, hate speech, or obscenities, no visible undergarments, and the requirement that there is a bottom, top, shoes, and the covering of genitalia at all times. Ripped jeans, short shorts, and shoulders are all allowed, with no current detriment to students or faculty. Now that we've familiarized yourself with what dress codes are and what they could be in a better world, let's dive into how they're being discriminatorily enforced. To start, even the most staunch supporter of dress codes has to admit that they are pointedly targeting girls' bodies. They often fail to take into account what's actually available in the clothing market for girls and boys and how it differs. Pictured here is a screenshot from a random Google search of girl shorts and boy shorts. As you can see, they're very different, and none of the girl shorts fit into the stipulations that we outlined earlier, but all the boy shorts do. If girls can't find clothing that meets the expectations of their dress code, how are they supposed to meet them? Another issue with dress codes is that with the reasonable modesty policy is that it leaves the dress code up to the discretion of faculty. Pictured here are two students from the same high school on the same day. Guess which one was dress coded? Even though the male student shows much more skin, the girl's skirt length was deemed inappropriate enough to be sent home from school missing 3 exams. This is clearly discriminatory. However, gender is not the only factor. Students of color are much more frequently cited for dress code violations, and the National Women's Law Center's study confirms this. And their Director of Educational Equity says, Black girls are the most impacted by these harmful policies. In addition to clothing stipulations, dress codes often include hair stipulations as well, which restrict cultural styles such as locks or braids. This enforces the stereotype, according to the study, that natural hairstyles are unprofessional. Another unfair way that dress codes target students is by their body type. In the example that I talked about earlier from my school, the vice principal described the student in front of us as being busty and aiming to be promiscuous. Busty is actually the same language used to describe this student here, and her outfit was deemed inappropriate enough to send her home from school, even though all that shows in the picture is her face, neck, hands, and knees. What more could she have reasonably done to ensure modesty? Students should never be punished for the same rule in a discriminatory fashion, nor should they have the same rule applied to them in two different ways. Now that we know the rules and how they're actually being practiced, let's talk about the effects that the current practices have. The Richmond Law Journal that I highlighted earlier highlights the damaging self-esteem effects of being viewed as an object that is in violation. Reasonable modesty and relying on faculty enforcement of policy allows for the adult commentary on the bodies of children, and it opens up the door to shaming and assumptions, as well as inappropriate comments. In that study, over 150 girls were surveyed. Many of them said that they were told that they were being sexy, slutty, promiscuous, or seductive. Ultimately, most of these restrictions do boil down to the fact that adults are viewing children in a very sexual light. Girls are told that they distract their peers and grossly enough adult faculty members. And while dress codes aim to teach modesty, they emphasize the need to cover the certain body parts on children. Ultimately, this tells students that it's their fault if a hypothetical distraction does occur, and it teaches children an ideology that is quite frankly scary when taken into the adult world, that a certain outfit, body type, or even gender is asking for it. It fails to hold boys, men, or other individuals accountable for their actions. In conclusion, while some may say that these restrictions are necessary for professionalism and a lack of distractions in schools, it seems clear that these policies are actually harboring the opposite behavior. As we come to the end of our examination, even those in favor can see the detriment. The rules are subjective, rely on humiliation, and are discriminatorily enforced. These long-lasting effects fail to teach consequences to students. So now that you know, what should you do? Examine your own biases, and if you're the community member of a student, reach out to them and ask for a shame-free code of dress. Let's do better. Thank you.